An unusual film series is unfolding in Britain, a celebration of changing times called the Listeners Project. It allows young filmmakers to record the last moments of architectural treasures around the UK before they're redeveloped. Teams of filmmakers are given a room or floor of an abandoned but iconic building, and 24 hours to create a short film. Jonathan Vigliotti has a story from London.
The cavernous halls of London's Farmelo building have sat vacant for years.
So are you somebody that walks through a space like this and wonders what took place here 100 years ago, what the history was?
Yeah, absolutely.
Ben Lambert founded the Listeners Project a year ago as a way to challenge young filmmakers and inspire an appreciation for the city's changing history.
We give the directors and the writers creative license to come up with stories that might have been, could be.
A series of cinematic vignettes that pay homage to distinctive sites before they're knocked down or redeveloped. Each short film imagines the stories of these walls, if these walls could talk.
A painter has a blank canvas to start with, a writer has a blank page, and they make something happen. We use the walls as our canvas for the stories.
Have a drink.
The final product is a series of films that are deeply personal and show people at a crossroads, much like the buildings themselves. At the BBC's old television center, a heartbroken ballerina is haunted by the memory of her lover. Meanwhile, at Farmelo, a hungry security guard chases a chicken for an egg for his dinner.
And it takes time not to question.
And a stairwell comes to life at the abandoned Swan Wharf.
When your life has gone astray.
The Listeners Project is part performance, part time capsule, an effort to capture the unique history of these spaces before gentrification takes hold.
Quite a lot of shadow on this side.
Four directors are given a space in the chosen building and just 24 hours each to film a scene based on a single idea.
Holes now bore in memory and fact.
As a former glass factory, for Farmelo, that became the theme.
Been at that window, behind that glass all my life.
And if this building looks familiar, that's because it is. These rooms had a starring role in Hollywood, transformed into Gotham's police station in Batman Begins.
This guy did deliver us one of the city's biggest crime lords.
No one takes the law into their own hands in my city. Understand?
The same space was reinvented for Inception as a chemist's laboratory.
How long do they dream for? 3-4 hours each day.
Probably the one thing that was lost.
But the Listeners Project is the Farmelo building's final act before it's turned into office space.
By then it will be alien spaceships and hovercrafts.
Executive producer Natasha Coleman coordinates the film's production.
Because one of the things about the Listeners Project is working with kind of young, up-and-coming filmmakers as well as those that are more established. So it's lovely for them to be in a space where so many movies were made.
Before the doors are closed for good, Lambert and Coleman turn the space into a cinema, screening the films right on set.
It gives the audience a sort of ownership of the imagination for them. You know, they can then create their own stories. They can literally watch the film and go, I wouldn't have done that. I would have done something else.
John?
The Listeners Project wants to take their work to America next, to changing cities like Detroit to capture the moment before redevelopment.
I think people who give us the keys and say, come and do it, well, at some level, they want to make something happen, a last hurrah for a building before it goes.
For CBS This Morning Saturday, Jonathan Vigliotti, London.
I think it's very interesting that they want to come to America next.
Detroit, of all places, is good. There's some bragging rights in that, don't you think, to be able to say, no, that was the last thing that was shot in that building?
And I love how they're trying to capture the spirit of these places, and they have a spirit. That's what's really cool.
Great piece from Jonathan Vigliotti there.